afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm Susan Chekow-Lusignan, Director of Marketing and Program Development for the Friends and Foundation of the Rochester Public Library. Welcome to Book Sandwiched In. We ask that you please silence your cell phones at this time. Our thanks go to those who help fund programs like these through FFRPL, the dedicated FFRPL committee members who curate and organize these events, our guest speakers who so graciously share their time and talents with us, the library staff who help with our setup and production, and the thousands of people who attend each year. We are live streaming the formal portion of today's program to the library's YouTube channel at Rochester Public Library, New York. If you need to access the induction loop service in the auditorium, please adjust your hearing aid to the T switch. FFRPL expands the library's impact. Our nonprofit organization raises funds, presents programs, supports special projects, helps to create specialized spaces, and purchases supplemental materials and equipment for the Rochester Public Library. Here are just a few examples. One way we raise funds is from book sales on site at RPL's bookstore and online. On your way out today, be sure to visit our fall book sale going on now just outside this auditorium. There are always some fun finds. We present programs like today's Book Sandwiched In Review and our annual Sokol High School Literary Awards. Registration is now open. You can check our website for details and instructions. We also support special community programs and projects like the Rochester Children's Book Festival, which will feature more than 50 authors and illustrators and will be held at Monroe Community College on Saturday, November 2nd, and FFRPL is a presenting sponsor. We also help to create specialized spaces. Recently, FFRPL helped support the Maplewood branch's temporary move to the former Holy Rosary Church and Mary's Place on Lexington Avenue. And finally, FFRPL purchases supplemental materials and equipment for the library. For the last 6 years, FFRPL has purchased New York State Empire passes for every MCLS library, central, branches, and towns. Empire passes provide free access at New York State parks and the State Department of Environmental Conservation, including forests, beaches, and trails. The passes are available for checkout with your library card. Today, Dr. Leisha Cudahy will review This Is Why You Dream, What Your Sleeping Brain Reveals About Your Waking Life by Rahul Jandiel, MD, PhD. Tracing cutting-edge dream research and brain science, neuroscientist and neurosurgeon Dr. Jandiel outlines how to tap into dreams to practice real-life skills, promote learning, amplify creativity, rewrite nightmares, reveal desires, and forecast mental and physical ailments such as Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. Dr. Leisha Cudahy is a licensed clinical psychologist, board certified in behavioral sleep medicine. She is assistant professor of psychiatry at the University of Rochester and an internationally recognized leader in non-medication treatments for insomnia and other sleep disorders. Please welcome her to our podium.
Oh, I'm very short. Okay. Hi. So full disclosure, I'm very used to public speaking, but I've never done something quite like this before. So I'm feeling a little nervous, and it's interesting that that's happening. So bear with me. So I just wanted to kind of start by explaining a little more about that introduction you just heard. What is behavioral sleep medicine, and what do I do in my clinic? And essentially, without going into a huge lecture, behavioral sleep medicine is just non-medication management of a variety of sleep disorders. In my clinic, I see mostly patients with insomnia, but also work with patients who have trouble adjusting to sleep apnea therapies, have trouble with timing of their sleep, or I see a lot of patients with nightmares as well. I found this book to be very interesting, and I just want to take a quick poll. How many people are here today with a specific kind of question or thought about what you read or that you're hoping to like learn. You don't have to say the question, I just want to kind of get a sense. Or you just want to hear what I have to say, that's also okay. Okay. So dream research has an interesting history. It goes way back. I think the probably first psychologist that, or I guess he was a psychiatrist, Freud talked a lot about dreams, but as Dr. Jandiel pointed out, like there's lots of recordings of dreams throughout history. Currently, there's a lot of research into how do we capitalize on what our brain does during sleep to promote health or mental health or learning, things like that. So I think like where I'd like to start is talking a little bit about well, actually, I'm going to start with my take-home messages, and then we'll circle back to those at the end. So I think a few of the most important things that I left this book with is being aware that the person doing the dreaming is the most appropriate person to interpret the dream and ascribe meaning to it. I was very glad when I read that sentence. I was afraid there was going to be some symbolic, like a ring means you want to get engaged or something. Point number 2 is we still don't really know that much about why we dream, but we do have some good ideas with some of the research that's been done. And lastly, the book has a lot of good science in it, but it also has a lot of speculation that's not necessarily backed up or possible to be backed up with science. So we'll dig into that in a little more detail. I'm kind of going to go through almost every chapter and more to say about some stuff than others. In terms of the evolution of dreaming, most of that chapter is really about REM sleep more than actual dreams. So there were a couple of quotes that I found like interesting. So one is that dreams could be the unimportant byproduct of something beneficial that happens during sleep. I think, and that was in the context of talking about random neuron firing during sleep. I think dreams can be random but still important. And I do think there is something that happens during REM sleep specifically that is important and not necessarily relevant to dream content, which that's a teaser. We'll come back to that. And the concept that dream narratives help us navigate the world and give us the best chance of dealing with the challenges we may face. So here, I think it's really more about REM sleep because there are lots of people that I see in day-to-day life in clinic that have never remembered a dream, and they really don't have any problem navigating the complexities of the world. So when we talk about dreams versus REM sleep, it is 100% true that dreams occur in each stage of sleep, but there are distinct differences between dreams that happen during REM sleep and dreams that happen during non-REM sleep. And we know this because we do research and we are mean to people and we wake them up at all different stages of sleep and ask them if they were dreaming and what they were experiencing. And dreams that happen outside of REM sleep have very different descriptions than dreams that happen during REM sleep. So non-REM dreams are usually vague. Sometimes they contain some imagery, sometimes a vague feeling of fear or like otherworldliness, but they don't usually have vivid imagery with a plot line or a narrative component. REM dreams are more vivid, they contain pictures, and there's usually, often bizarre, but there's some kind of plot or story. It might not make a lot of sense when we wake up, but we can kind of say like, well, this happened, and then this happened, and that didn't make sense, but then this happened. And so if, like, looking through that chapter, when he's talking about the types of dreams and the evolution, like, almost all of those are the vivid, like, storyline dreams. So I think that what he's talking about is REM sleep rather than dreaming per se. And there are several times throughout the book that he seems to he equates them. And I think it could be argued, and lots of people do argue, that whenever we have REM sleep, we're dreaming, but there's no way to know that. Dreams are entirely dependent on a person's subjective report. We cannot tell what someone is seeing in their brain in terms of like imagery or story or content without asking them to recall that. I think some of this is just nitpicky and pet peevey, but I do think it's important because he does ascribe meaning to some of the content, and I don't believe that that's always relevant in the way that he kind of pulls it in. So another theme throughout the book is that dreams are a form of like rehearsal or skill building or an opportunity to kind of test out new scenarios in a safe space. Our brain can kind of learn things about how we interact with others or how we form skills. And most of that seems pretty theoretical and conjecture to me. The literal lucid dreaming and practicing skills is, a real thing that can be applied. But there's not a lot of evidence to support that dreams are practicing. And in fact, it seems more likely that the opposite is true when we're faced with different scenarios in our life, or if we're struggling with a decision or a stressor, or even not. What happens in our waking lives is more likely to drive our dreams than the opposite way around. I think, first of all, he says several times that dreams don't represent any kind of secret subconscious desire or latent need or anything like that. And I don't think what we experience in our dreams isn't usually super applicable. In a logistical way, it's not like, in my dream, I went and did this thing, and maybe I should do it in real life. Sometimes that happens, but more likely they're fantastical and bizarre and don't always apply. And we don't remember most of our dreams. Even if we go with the assumption that all of REM sleep includes dreaming, how many people remember a dream every single night or every single time they wake up from sleep? Well, that's awesome. That's exciting. Most people don't. And there certainly are people that do, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if they were really a learning experience, I feel like we would remember them more. Also, a lot of this is my opinion, and if you had somebody else, they might be giving different opinions, so that's another full disclosure piece. The nightmare chapter, this is the chapter I had the hardest time with in terms of why we have nightmares. And his theory is that nightmares help us develop our sense of self. And I just think he has this backwards, where we're not having nightmares so that our imagined self can be more formed by fighting off monsters. We're struggling with our identity and development of ourself when we're 7 to 8 years old, and so that struggle and conflict is manifested in our dreams rather than our dreams serving some self-development process. I mean, it's cyclical, so it's hard to define one way or the other, but that's kind of the point also. I think a lot of that is theory. And it's a nice little package. It makes sense when you put it that way. But there's no way to test things like this. Okay. Yeah, and it's a convenient explanation for why everybody has nightmares at some point in their life, but those statements, while mostly true, I have a hard time with definitive statements like that. Everybody has a nightmare at some point in their life. Maybe, but maybe not. The dreaming and creativity chapter was super interesting, and oh no, that was a different chapter. Again, this is more about REM sleep than dreaming, and he actually says several times that the content of the dream didn't matter, or it didn't even matter if people remembered their dreams, they still kind of got this insight or solved a puzzle, and that's just evidence that if it doesn't matter what you dream about, then it's not the dream that matters, it's the stage of sleep. He also makes a lot of claims that dreaming is the source of most inspiration. And I think there are lots of stories from history about kind of sparks of inspiration or creativity that come after or in response to a dream. But I just did a Google search of aha moments in history, and there were 3 or 4 on this top, it was a top 15 list. It was Google, so I don't vouch for the validity of it, but there were 3 dreams, and then there was like working as a patent clerk. Einstein had a lot of inspiration in that moment. Apples falling from a tree, Isaac Newton. Getting on a ski lift, a guy I didn't recognize, a math wizard. Taking a bath, Archimedes had some insight while he was in the bath. A music composer was rowing a boat on a lake. I think the theme is not necessarily the dreams, but the lack of active engagement of the executive network. I think the distinction between the imagination network and the executive network that comes up throughout the book is legitimate, real. I think when we are activating our executive network and reasoning through our days, it's harder to get inspiration or insight because we're focused on a problem. This is kind of what I say to my insomnia patients. If we're focused on trying to fix something, sometimes it's harder to just let the thing happen. So when we're able to kind of let go of that effort and the intensity, your brain has more space to just generate things. And I think that that is true, and I think it doesn't have to be during or because of dreaming, or even REM sleep for that matter. There is a lot of research around REM sleep specifically serving to consolidate memory, and emotional memory in particular. Our emotional networks are more active during sleep, and all sleep. They're more active during REM sleep than others, but pretty much that logical executive reasoning center is the first thing that falls asleep, sometimes even before we get into bed. And it's the last thing to wake up in the morning. So when your alarm goes off, your little lizard amygdala brain is like, we're not gonna get up, this is obnoxious. And your rational brain that knows you need to get to work doesn't always, it takes a minute to boot up, right? It's like dial-up internet from the 90s. Like, you're kind of waiting for that signal to come through. So in terms of, so they have selectively, they've done a lot of research like selectively depriving people of REM or giving them opportunity for REM sleep, and it does help with problem solving and memory consolidation in above and beyond just a regular nap without REM sleep. But over and over, studies have shown that it's not dependent on the content of the dream. And I would argue that whatever problem we're working on before bed, when we're sleeping and our executive network is offline, we have the innate ability to amalgamate whatever problem we were working on with all of our history, like our life history, our autobiographical memory, our procedural memory, and we can integrate it in a way that we're just not able to do when we try hard. So it's the insight that's coming from that internal process of consolidating all of those things. It's not coming from like dreaming about the literal solution to the problem, which he does say several times as well. A couple other examples of why this is a REM sleep and not dreaming. So like the maze learning task, if people had any dream, they did better with the maze, even if it was unrelated to a maze. And at the closing of that chapter, he kind of talks about, like, he says, even when you don't remember your dreams, they can influence your waking thoughts. And sources of insight may be a dream, even if it's unremembered. But that seems like impossible to me. If you don't remember having a dream, how can you attribute any insight or inspiration to the dream? So it's just kind of confusing to me. And I think evidence that we're really talking about the REM sleep, not the dream content. I think this sounds more critical than I intended it to be as I'm listening to myself talk. So I think this is heuristic. Like, it's easier to talk about dreaming than to talk about REM sleep. It's more approachable to an audience. And a lot of people, it is synonymous in some ways. There are a lot of people that believe that every time we're in REM sleep, we're dreaming. I think it's just not provable, because if you don't remember, then we don't know for sure. We do know, though, that like all the visual cortices, all of those brain regions that he talks about associated with vivid dreams, they're active in REM sleep, whether people report dreaming or not. So I don't think it's a super stretch to synonymize the two. Again, it's kind of more of a pet peeve than anything. It's not like scientifically accurate, because we can't measure dreams. We can only measure REM sleep. In terms of the relationship between dreams and health, again, I think a lot, see, this was another pet peeve. When he's talking about the REM, like the nightmares and the REM-related movement or the dream enactment behavior in this relationship to Parkinson's disease, that is a true relationship. If you are over 40 and you have a sudden onset of nightmares and you're moving around a lot in your sleep, you should absolutely bring it up and see a neurologist, because there is a very high correlation between new onset of those symptoms and Parkinson's disease. It's a warning sign. It's not a prognostic, and it also has nothing to do with dreaming. It doesn't matter what the content of the dream is. When our brains are building up those proteins that come along with the Parkinson's disease, it's causing those changes in our dreams and our movements during sleep. So again, not so much about dreaming, but about like the effect of that biological change on the dreaming process. Also, there was a lot of confirmation bias in that chapter. All of the studies he talks about where dreams were predictive of things, all of the dream reports were after the diagnosis, including the one, I actually went and read the study about women dreaming about breast cancer and then subsequently getting diagnosed. They only interviewed people who had a diagnosis of breast cancer and asked them about their dreams from before. So we have no idea how many women were dreaming about breast cancer, went and got tested, and then didn't have breast cancer, which is probably a lot. I think there is truth to the fact that when we have changes in our bodies, our brain might tune into them before our full awareness does, and that can show up. But I did like that he pulled in the teeth dream, because this was a huge thing for me. When I was in graduate school, we had really crappy insurance, and like, I don't know, the dentist was super expensive, and so I would just kind of avoid going as long as possible. And then when I started having dreams of my teeth falling out, I was like, okay, it's time to go to the dentist. And there was nothing ever wrong with my teeth. I always got good, I think once I had a cavity, but generally I always got good dental reports. So it wasn't so much indicative of something that was actually wrong, but like something that was internal, like I knew I should be going to the dentist, and like it just crept up in there. When my rational brain was like, you can't afford this, my emotional brain was like, you should probably go to the dentist. I won't recommend that as a deciding when to go to the dentist factor. It's probably too long to wait. But I think it's more likely that the changes in our bodies and symptoms in our bodies, we can ignore them when we're awake and alert and we're living our lives. So if I have a little like pain in my knee, but it's not like causing me to not walk, I just like push ahead. You know, you get past it, you suck it up, and you go forward with your life. And when we sleep, we have less access to that like gatekeeping of, I'm just gonna push through. All we have is our emotional, so we can process what's going on in our bodies in a different way than when we're awake. So I don't wanna say that we should ignore dream content when it comes to like physical or health symptoms, but I also don't think it would be very beneficial for doctors to ask what people are dreaming about at every visit, because they're not really predictive of anything. I think it's more effective or efficient for that to be on the patient end. If you're having a dream about something being wrong, maybe pay a little attention to symptoms during the day or bring it up to your doctor. So in terms of like doctors assessing dreams, I think the value is like what kind of changes in sleep have happened or onset of nightmares or things that are new, but asking about what did you dream about over the last couple of weeks, I don't think would be very beneficial. And again, like almost all of the studies that he cites in terms of how dreams look in people with schizophrenia or dissociative identity disorder or even like dementia or depression, like all of those are people who have been diagnosed reporting on their dreams. I don't think there have been any studies where they're taking prospective, like ongoing dream reports and then looking at who develops what later. We do that for a lot of things. We do that for insomnia. And we know that people with insomnia are at higher risk for developing depression and some other downstream effects, but that's not been done in dreams. So again, I don't think the dream content it hasn't been studied. So I don't necessarily want to go ahead and state it's irrelevant, but I think it's overstated in the book. Lucid dreaming. So this is actually really interesting. So I listened to this audiobook, which was interesting because his voice is very soporific. I was like, this is ironic. I want to fall asleep while I'm reading this. But I was reading and going through and making notes on my way to a behavioral sleep medicine conference in Chicago. So I was just getting together with a bunch of other people in the field, and one of the people cited in the lucid dreaming chapter was actually speaking at the conference. So I was like, because I was watching the presentation, I was like, I feel like I just read this. And so I pulled out the book, and I'm like, I did just read this. That's cool. So I went up and talked to him afterwards, and I asked permission to show him some of the book, and another IRT, imagery rehearsal therapy researcher that I'm friends with, took a look also, and they had the same opinions as me. It's like he talks about the science well, but then he takes like 6 steps away from it, and it's not always clear when he's moving into theory from the science. So lucid dreaming is absolutely a real thing. He says, he has a couple sentences about, like, think about stroke patients or paralysis patients, and maybe we can activate those neurons with lucid dreaming. And again, it's true that when we're dreaming, our brains look like they would if we were experiencing those things awake, like the electricity patterns are the same. But I think it's a huge stretch to get from there to like re-energizing or reactivating injured brain region. I mean, even if the brain region isn't injured, I just think that's a big leap. And in terms of, you can absolutely teach yourself to lucid dream, but with caution. So it doesn't always mean you control your dreams. I think lucid dreaming, the definition is being aware that you're dreaming. Some people, I think the popular view of it is that then you can control it, and sometimes that's true, but not always. So you could be stuck in a dream that now you can't control or get out of. A lot of people who have lucid dreams report that sleep is less restorative. If you're awake and aware you're dreaming and kind of doing stuff in your dreams all night, it may feel like you were awake the whole night because you were invested in the dream. And if you put a lot of effort into learning how to lucid dream, you can't always turn it off later. Not many. I've seen, I think, 2 patients. I've been doing this for 15 years. I think I've seen a couple patients who were like super excited, taught themselves how to lucid dream, and now we're like, I never feel like I get a good night of sleep because I'm controlling my dreams all the time, and I just want to stop. And there's like, you can't pull back that switch always, or there's no manual on how to stop lucid dreaming. In terms of, I just have one more thing about the future of dreaming. My opinion is that it is, I mean, I'm sure it's possible because technology surprises me every single day, but the idea of being able to measure electricity in the brain and then somehow be able to translate that into like a movie that you could play about what someone is dreaming, that seems highly unlikely. And he talks about this a little bit because like everybody's brain functions a little differently. And I think it's definitely possible that like we could tell if you were dreaming about a plant or like a mode of transportation. There are brain areas that are very specific to very specific things. But the thing about dreams when we experience them is the narrative, right? It's not just random images that like pop up in our brains. There's a story. And to get from measuring electricity to say, oh, they're dreaming of a tree, to like, I was in a park and I was laying in the shade and I had a picnic with my fiance, and then all of a sudden we were in an airport, and like that narrative I don't think would be measurable at all. Because I just don't think there's, at least not enough consistency. Like everybody's brain is gonna be a little different. And I think even creating like a map to compare to is, who are you gonna map to compare everybody else to? What's going to be your standard? I don't know how that would even happen. The dream advertising was a little scarier to read. I think that I would like to think that that's all crazy and nobody would ever do that, but we have all sorts of devices in our bedrooms, and people who want to sell you stuff are pretty insidious sometimes. So I don't know if that's happening. I feel like it's not, but I guess we don't know. If you're worried about somebody trying to advertise in your dreams, just turn everything off. Like, leave Alexa out of the room, because the truth is you can't always know if there's something playing if you have like an Alexa in your room. I'm not worried about it personally. My husband always says I'm an advertiser's like best dream, because I watch commercials and I'm like, oh, we should get that. But everybody's more or less susceptible to things like that. But that does seem more in line with things that could happen given how ubiquitous tech is in our day-to-day lives. But yeah, I mean, if you turn everything off at night, you should be safe. So circling back to the take-home. So I didn't speak out loud about the interpretation chapter, mostly because I thought that was pretty spot on. That was the only chapter I was like, okay, this is like good, and I don't have anything really to add. The types of dreams, I don't know if those are, like when he categorized the different types, I don't know if that's a universally applied thing, but they all made sense, and I think there are some dreams that are super obvious. There are some dreams that aren't, and you're the best person who can decide how meaningful it is to you. I said I was working on these note cards last night before I went to bed. I definitely dreamed something about speaking, or I don't remember it now. I didn't write it down. But that it happened. It was very obvious why I was dreaming about that. And sometimes things are a little more subtle. If dreams are concerning, or if you really want some insight, like a good therapists aren't like trained in dream interpretation, but somebody who knows your history, it doesn't have to be a therapist, it could be a friend too, like somebody who knows your personal history and your experience in life and what you're going through. Like, dreams are metaphorical, and sometimes it takes an outside perspective to kind of draw some of those lines, but if it doesn't make sense to you, then that might not be what it means to you. Like, going online or going to a book and looking for symbols and definitions, like a dream dictionary, that's all made up. I mean, it makes sense. Like, it's all logical, right? So yeah, if you dream about a leaf, sure, that could be a symbol of change when you think about autumn, but so could 18 million other things. So applying it in that kind of exact, literal fashion, sometimes it can help to see what's out there, and if it feels right to you, then great. But that's the important thing. Like, if you look and you're like, well, this is all nonsense, then yeah, okay, it probably is. But if you're like, oh yeah, okay, I am struggling with a change, and maybe that's why I'm dreaming about that, then great. I did like how he's compared it to like astrology or fortune telling. Like, those dream dictionaries are kind of widely applicable statements. Like, who doesn't have a change going on in their life at some point? And that's I guess from the marketer's view, the beauty of something like that is that if you say something vague that applies to most people, then you're going to be right most of the time, and then people are going to buy in and maybe buy your product. But you can tell I'm a little cynical. But I think just going back to like your impression and what you take out of those interpretations is more important than the literal kind of translation, I guess. I think, again, like if you want to remember more dreams, getting in the habit of writing them down in the morning can certainly be helpful. I think you should ask yourself why you want to remember more dreams, if that's the case, and make sure your goals around that are realistic and appropriate. Because dreams can definitely give you insight about things going on in your life, but it takes self-awareness to make that step from what you picture in your dream to what it like means to you during the day. And it's always possible that you won't like what you discover, I guess, but it's not supposed to be a recipe or a prediction or anything like that. So at the end of all this, we still don't really know why we dream, but we have a pretty good idea that it helps consolidate memory from the REM science. In terms of the speculation, just going to highlight, I think a lot of the way he described things was like dreams help with life. I think that is partially true, but I think life informs dreams, and then dreams process life, and then that cycle starts. So I think it all starts with what we experience that makes us dream the way we do, rather than our dreams kind of driving our reality. Dreams are probably not literal practice of things, but they can reflect like ongoing questions or struggles or conflicts. I don't think nightmares exist to create our sense of self, but could be a manifestation of that process. Dreams don't predict disease, but changes in how we dream or how we sleep can be a warning sign or a risk factor. And then REM sleep helps with learning, memory, and insight, but that's independent of the dream content. So those are my notes. I have like a 2 index card list of like pet peeves that I came across. If you're interested, that probably wouldn't be super helpful. But I would be happy to take questions if there's time.
We're going to pull a name for a copy of the book. So
Oh.
people review for that.
Candace Sorensen.